Hello everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Let me firstly introduce myself. I'm Mariam from VOLO's Business Development and Marketing team. As a brief introduction, VOLO is a custom software development company that has been in this business for over 16 years with a team of over 300 specialists. I'm delighted to be your moderator today. The topic of our webinar is Flutter versus native development to understand which is better for your mobile app. We have chosen this particular topic because over the years we have found that this is one of the questions addressed most by our clients who come to us with an idea for a mobile app. We hope that by the end of our session, you will have formed a pretty good understanding of both of these approaches. And if you do have an app idea in mind, you'll probably start leaning towards one or the other. But don't worry, if you still have questions by the end of the webinar, not a problem at all. You can always contact our team for more detailed information. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and you can access it in your mailbox within a couple of hours after the webinar is over. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers, Robert and Andranik. As expert specialists in their respective spheres, they will be introducing you to Flutter and native technologies in as non-technical terms as possible. Robert is a senior mobile developer and a team lead who specializes both in native technologies and Flutter. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Mariam. Thank you. It's good to be here.
And Andranik is a senior Android developer and team lead. Hi, Andranik.
Hi, Mariam. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you both. Now, welcome again. And the format of our webinar today will be the following. We'll start off by introducing mobile development in general, the different approaches and technologies out there, and more specifically, we will introduce Flutter and native development with their respective pros and cons. I want you to know that in the meantime, we are going to need your help and input as well, dear audience, and we are going to be asking you to vote in our post to help our speakers get a better understanding of your preferences and opinions. After giving you a general overview of Flutter and native, we are going to take a deeper dive into these two approaches to mobile development and rate them against different criteria like performance, security. Please keep in mind that you can participate in the webinar by asking all your burning questions in our chat room. By the way, you can find that in the lower right corner of your screen. Okay, so moving forward, I want to ask Andranik to cover the key approaches to mobile app development. If I want to develop an app, what options do I have?
Okay, thank you, Mariam. So there are a number of technologies and ways to build mobile applications for the two major mobile platforms. And now let's have a very high-level overview of some of them. So there we have the native technologies, of course, the Android and iOS, which were the primary and the only way to develop mobile apps for a while until various cross-platform technologies began to emerge. Then we have the so-called web-based cross-platform technologies, the main representatives of which can be considered 𝗙𝗹𝘂𝘁𝗲𝗿 and Ionic. These do not create true mobile apps, but rather they wrap the web pages inside the mobile app. And although there are still a community of developers who choose these technologies to solve various tasks, our experience showed that these technologies cannot provide the performance and usability we are looking for. So we don't even tend to offer them as an option for our clients' mobile apps. But things are not that bad in cross-platform world. There are other ways to share code between two platforms, and one such technique is so-called semi-cross-platform technologies. And what I mean by this is that you have one code base that reflects the logics of the app for all platforms, and you have a platform-specific UI which is implemented with the help of native technologies. So imagine an application which, for example, grabs the weather forecast from the internet and makes a suggestion about what one should wear and shows that on the screen. And in this case, the code for grabbing the weather data from the internet and making the suggestion is platform agnostic. And this can be shared between two platforms. And only the application's UI will be developed in native. And last but not least, there are the true cross-platform technologies which try to cover both the logic and UI parts of the application without the need for writing native code. And here we have Xamarin from Microsoft, React Native from Facebook, and of course Flutter from Google. And although we have experience with all of these platforms and even have active ongoing Xamarin projects, we came to the conclusion that Flutter is the best cross-platform platform framework among those.
Now let me explain why we consider Flutter the best cross-platform technology covered by Andronic. So here are the 4 key points: mobile, UI, growing community, and Google. Cross-platform technology, the first and the most important point is mobile, means that the technology should have a mobile approach to make iOS and Android developers feel at home. Flutter is the one that has a mobile approach, unlike the technologies we mentioned earlier. One remarkable thing about Flutter is that it uses its own UI engine similar to Unity and doesn't depend on a hosting platform's UI elements. This means you get to have the exact same UI look and feel on the different versions of the platform. For example, we should have the same experience between iOS 12 and iOS 14 without any UI issues. Flutter is a big community nowadays, and it is another advantage of it. And the community is growing rapidly. It's a lot easier now to solve issues with the help of Stack Overflow and GitHub. Flutter has high popularity on Stack Overflow trend as a cross-platform mobile SDK, higher than React Native, even though it is much newer technology than React Native. One thing I want to point out is that Flutter is Google's framework. This means that it's an easy choice for you, thanks to the framework design, language, and for sure the rich documentation. Moreover, we will cover about Flutter in upcoming sessions.
That's really interesting, Robert, because as a non-tech person, I can say that it's clear to me now why you guys prefer Flutter over other cross-platform technologies and why it's becoming more and more popular choice for app development these days. Now that we've covered why we prefer Flutter, let's focus on native technologies and what are their strong suits and where do they lag with respect to cross-platform technologies?
Okay, Mariam, so I'll cover that. So on the plus side, the native platforms, Android and iOS, are quite old. And this means that they have gone through many transformations and modernization stages and have reached to a stage of maturity. So native mobile frameworks have a rich history. They were the main focus and the first-class citizens for their respective platforms for a long time. And with all the updates in place, now they are modern and rich programming frameworks. Also, both platforms now offer a modern declarative UI frameworks, Jetpack Compose and Swift UI, respectively. Speaking about pros and cons of these technologies compared to Flutter, and we will go into more details on this topic in a bit. Native frameworks offer a slightly better performance and are more convenient to provide platform-specific UX UI. Also, a very important thing to note is that the platform library updates are immediately available to developers, and it's generally easier to work with device hardware. There are more third-party libraries and SDKs available for native languages, and this makes developers' lives easier. And also, they can find a bit more community support regarding their questions. But let's first go back to the very basics. What does native development mean? So it means you have two different developers or teams depending on the scale of your app. working on the same application. So you have one code base for iOS and another one for Android. And because you have to separate teams and code bases, the development and QA cost will tend to be higher for native platforms compared to Flutter, where you only have one code base for both platforms. And now Robert will tell us how things are on the Flutter side.
Yeah, let's talk about the Flutter's pros and cons. By writing apps with cross-platform technologies, one of the most important things we gain is the single code base for all of the platforms. Nowadays, Flutter supports all major platforms for mobile, iOS and Android to desktop, web, Windows, Linux, and macOS. But for now, it's more stable for mobile platforms. Even though desktop and web are in a stable release, they need some more time to become really production ready and to have time to develop all the necessary libraries. Another advantage of Flutter is its language. Flutter uses the programming language Dart, which again belongs to Google. Google has done an excellent job by adapting the language to the framework and making it work perfectly with Flutter, which in the end results to high performance for your application. Another important point is that Flutter could be integrated into an existing native application. So what does this mean? Imagine you have an app that's being developed in a native languages like Android or iOS, and after a while you start to feel a shortage of resources. At this point, you can switch to Flutter and continue with one single code base for your app instead of maintaining two. So those are all pros for the Flutter, and enough Flutter praising. Let's start with the cons. Actually, my list is quite short here. There are two main disadvantages I want to discuss. The first one is that with Flutter, it's harder to work with hardware APIs like camera, Bluetooth, and location. To use these kinds of APIs, we have to wire up Flutter code with the appropriate platform APIs, which will require more maintenance, or we will need to use some library which already does it, which will add third-party dependency for your application. In both cases, there will be more effort and work for developers. However, even then, Flutter provides all the necessary tools to make this possible. So before we move on the next disadvantage, I would like to have your opinion about next question. So let's answer the question right here. Do you pay attention to the size of the application when you're downloading it, like downloading it from the Apple Store or Google Store?
Yeah, dear audience, now you are seeing a poll appeared on your screen, and please select the option that you think is best. Let's give some time to our audience to vote. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is interesting, Robert. It seems like almost most of our audience doesn't care about the app size. I can see from the poll.
Yeah, maybe you don't pay attention to the size of the app, but that's the other disadvantage of the Flutter that I wanted to discuss, is the archive size. The archive size of the Flutter apps is a bit bigger compared to the native applications by around 15 to 20 megabytes. This is because the Flutter app ships with extra engine code, and that adds a few megabytes to it. But to be honest, these disadvantages are true for every cross-platform technology when you compare it to native, not just with Flutter.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, in the tech world, you can't always have your cake and eat it too. There is almost always a trade-off, and every technology has its stronger and weaker points. And here, the developers should always analyze the application needs as well as the client resource availability objectively to be able to choose the right technology. Andronik, I have another question for you. So when a client comes to you with an app idea or an existing application that they would like to improve, what is your approach to the situation, and what are the main factors you consider to help guide them in the right direction?
Okay, so if you turn to us with an idea for a mobile app that you want to develop from scratch, or if you want to modernize or refactor your existing app, which part is better? Which part should you go native or Flutter? So that's the question. And even if it seems simple enough question, the answer isn't always straightforward. It depends on various factors, both objective and subjective. And since there are no official guidelines on which technology to choose for a specific case, the ultimate decision will be made by you. Of course, after you have had all the help and guidance from your technical team and or have heard your partner's company experts' advice. So if you turn to a tech expert or a company that only knows one of those technologies, chances are they will tell you to go with the technology that they know, aggressively ignoring other approaches. But in our company, as we have rich experience in both approaches, we start by understanding our clients' business and what their app will gain or lose by being developed in native or Flutter. And by the way, for the participants of this webinar, we have good news. If you have a mobile app idea and would like to analyze it and offer you advice from our company's experts, which approach is best for your application, we can schedule a free discovery call and give you our feedback. So just click on the link that we have shared on the screen and book the time that works best for you.
Okay, let's give some time to our audience to book a meeting if they would like to have a free discovery call about their project. Yeah, okay. Now let's move forward and I wanted to ask you guys about the factors which you consider. Let's start with the performance. So to make it more clear for audience, let's start considering the key factors when evaluating these two approaches for client application. So what would you say?
Okay, yeah, let's start with one of the pressing issue, performance. Both native and Flutter promise 60 FPS user experience and in most cases do what they promised. However, as the native frameworks are first-class citizens for their operating systems, they usually work a bit more efficiently with the resources of the device. This means that if all is equal, they could be considered slightly better in performance. As Flutter has an extra layer working on top of the host platform, technically it cannot be faster than the platform itself. It uses a bit of extra CPU and extra memory. It's worth mentioning that while native applications usually provide slightly better performance compared to Flutter, with modern devices, these differences are not noticeable and in most cases can be ignored at all. Another important concern for our customers is security. Andranik, what do you have to say about this?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes to security, actually both platforms offer production-ready security, and there is no significant difference between the two. The Flutter engine runs on top of the platform and extends carrier platform security features. However, in terms of some security-related native APIs like cryptographic, biometric authentication API, etc., we should take into account the fact that Flutter relies on the security mechanism of the underlying OS and uses its native APIs, which are released by platform channels, which is a sort of a bridge mechanism which brings the native APIs to Flutter. And here we have two consequences which we should note. So first one is that there is this additional code layer, which by itself can have security issues. And also getting the latest updates for native APIs as soon as they are released sometimes can be more tricky on Flutter than in case of native. And although this is not a direct security issue, but rather a potential issue which a Flutter application might one day have, native apps have a bit of an advantage here. However, 95% of applications will be fine with both approaches. It's because of these reasons the native scores a bit higher than Flutter in terms of overall security.
Yeah. Now let's talk about one of the favorite topics of our product owners, development time. And this is one of the key areas where Flutter beats native. With Flutter, you create one code base for both platforms, which inevitably reduces development time. However, let's not forget that Flutter is a UI framework, and it does well when your task is related to UI and business logic, but not too well when you are dealing with scary native hardware APIs. So back to the competition, Flutter beats native on UI tasks and business logic due to its framework features like hot reload and hot restart, but loses to native when it comes to hardware APIs. And in short, you can just remember this term. Flutter wins in cases where your app UI and business logic outweighs hardware APIs. Let me illustrate this with one of our recent applications that we have developed in Flutter. And yeah, just take a look. And this is an ideal example of a mobile application with rich UI. As you can see, this app has lots of screens with many lists, tabs, and info pages. And believe me, it looks like the same for all platforms and for all versions of the same platform. This is why many corporations like eBay and BMW choose Flutter for their apps. It's very convenient to create stunning UI and native-like feel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert, for showcasing the real example. Let me quickly get back to our presentation. Okay. Yeah, so here we go.
Okay, so the next thing is very important topic. Let's now speak about what it means in terms of development resources and the final cost. So based on everything we have covered thus far, you have probably came to a conclusion that it takes less resources to develop a Flutter application as opposed to native. This means you get to save more. And this is the main selling point for startups who are on their way of building their MVPs or rapid prototypes. So exactly how much can you save if you choose to use Flutter? The answer is it depends. In our experience, if you are building an app that is perfectly in line with what Flutter offers based on what we have discussed so far, so no or little platform-specific UI, no hardware dependencies, etc., you can save up to 30-35% of time and resources. And I can't stress this enough, you don't always get to save time and resources with Flutter. It's only the case for apps that do not require platform-specific features. And your tech team has to evaluate how much platform-specific code your app is going to require based on your product roadmap in order for you to really know which approach is going to be the most beneficial for your app in long term. Here, if you don't mind, I would like to ask another small survey question. So do you think an ideal mobile application should have a platform-specific look and feel on Android and iOS, or the look and feel should be exactly the same on both platforms? Okay. Let's wait to see the results of the poll.
It seems yeah. No.
Yeah, still polling.
Yeah.
Okay, but since the polling has stopped on and we have very interesting look here, so exactly 50% of you think that platform-specific look and feel is better, and another 50% think that same look and feel is better. So of course there is no right or wrong answer here. Actually, this is a matter of taste. And just take into account that in case of Flutter application, platform-specific look and feel comes with a cost. Yeah.
Yeah, let's move forward. Another factor to consider is libraries and SDKs availability. As Flutter is developed by Google, they provide a lot of state-of-art libraries and SDKs. But no platform can do well without quality third-party libraries developed by community members. Flutter has a quite big arsenal of various third-party libraries, which are mainly posted in a special repository called pub.dev. However, due to the much longer existence of native frameworks, they had the ability to accumulate more third-party libraries and SDKs. Sometimes these are small things which can be easily developed in Flutter and don't rely even on third-party libraries. But sometimes the absence of some specific and sophisticated SDKs can be a game changer and a reason to go with native rather than with Flutter. However, for nearly 80–85% of applications, Flutter has all third-party libraries that you may need.
Yeah, can't disagree with you with that. And the next topic is related to developers availability. And in the Flutter developer community is growing very fast. Moreover, many iOS and Android native developers switch to Flutter or learn Flutter as a second technology or maybe willing to learn it. However, the native technologies have been there for a bit longer than Flutter and managed to create a bigger community of developers. So finding a native developer is a bit easier compared to Flutter. However, you should also note that for an experienced native developer, it's not very hard to switch to Flutter. So Robert, let's next cover the cases where mobile app has a hardware dependency.
Sure. For native applications, working with device hardware and file systems is a usual thing and is not a big deal because there are many built-in APIs for that. But with Flutter, working with hardware APIs depends on a specific situation and whether there is a ready-to-use plugin for that or not. For example, Flutter has great plugins for working with file systems, device secure storage, and etc. However, even in these cases, we should remember that our solution should work with two totally different operating systems, which have their own rules for working with hardware. Where in case of just dealing with UI, things are simpler, as the UI is drawn by the same graphic engine on both platforms. On our experience, we see that if the application heavily relies on the usage of device hardware, it's better to use native rather than with Flutter. So, Andranik, if the client decided to go with Flutter, are there any risks to find yourself in a situation when you need a new feature, but there is no possibility to implement that in a Flutter, and you have to throw away all your Flutter code and start with the native?
Yeah, good question. I would say technically there are no risks to find yourself in such a scary situation with Flutter, as at the end of the day, everything that is possible to have in native is also possible to implement with Flutter, with the platform channels, the bridging mechanism that we discussed earlier. But one of the most important aspects to take into account while deciding to choose between native or on cross-platform is how much of the functionality of the app needs to rely on platform channels or similar approaches, and whether those solutions already exist or need to be developed from scratch, and if they exist, how reliable are they? So although in theory there shouldn't be any risk, practically there can be if the initial research was not done or done poorly. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Andranik. Thank you, Robert. And as a reminder, I would like to say that if you need help and guidance in choosing the right technology for your mobile app, you can book a free call with us. I'll share the link right away and during our Q&A session. And yeah, let's quickly move forward to our questions. Let me see, what questions do we have here? So here is a question. Hello, you said Flutter not yet stable for web or on each terms. Exactly? I think this is for you, Robert.
Yeah. So, yeah, actually, that's a question to think about, as my background is from mobile development and I have no too much experience on web development. I cannot give you an exact things that are missing on a Flutter for the web development or not, but I was attending on the Flutter conference on last month. So there I have talked with a lot of web developers that have tried to work with Flutter, and that's actually based on their opinion that Flutter for the web is now in a younger age. So there are, and even you think about it, you cannot disagree with that, because we have web technology for years and it has accumulated a lot of resources, libraries for everything you ever need. Even you can think about some JavaScript libraries, and I bet you can find with that made up name a JavaScript library. So Flutter Web doesn't have that right now, and it is a bit more risky to go to production with the Flutter Web. Even though you can consider to build more secure solutions with Flutter Web, like landing pages and maybe some applications, admin dashboards that are not too much related with the customer and doesn't have too much functionality on it. So in general, yeah, I would not consider Flutter Web for the serious production projects right now.
And in the VOLO, I will add here one more aspect that I consider myself. So usually the mobile applications tend to have the same flows, let's say same user experience, and users also like expect the same kind of behavior from mobile application. But for web applications, usually, not always, but usually the user's expectation and the needs are different. So even if you do this in Flutter, I mean, you may find you in a situation where the like required functionalities are becoming too differ from each other so much that your code base becomes divided, and in a long term it can be like it can become messy, because you are trying to manage this mobile code base and web code base, which are going in different directions in the same project. But if it's not so this is another aspect that I would consider, at least.
Okay, guys. Another question. If I'm not happy with the code quality of my app, what's written? If I'm not happy with the code quality of my app that's written in Flutter, is it possible to save it, or should I rewrite it from scratch in native?
Oh, that's actually two questions. Two questions out there. So, thanks for the question, and it's a good question, and it's good to think about it. So we have situations previously like this, and as a small secret, I will say you that there are a lot of Flutter projects out there with tons of junky code, and believe me, this is a common situation. This is because Flutter is easy to start with, but it is much easier to mess with the Flutter code in case developer has not duly understanding what he's doing with Flutter framework. So we have encountered situations like this before, as I mentioned, and as a solution, we tried to reuse as much as possible from the legacy code, but at the same time to try to fix the project's main problems, like architectural problems, navigation structure, and adding some code styles. So it's sometimes I can agree that it will be not possible to refactor some code, but in generally we have encountered situations like that and really have hard situations, so we bypass that. So by moving the next part of the question, as I remember, it was like massive project, should I rewrite it in native, right? As we talked about this session, we should consider how much hardware specific functionality do you have, and based on that, we should decide, go with native or with Flutter. If you will gain like time and maybe development resource, it's probably worth to go with Flutter. But your application, if has its like a lot of hardware specific functionality, in that case, most probably will advise to go with native rather than with Flutter.
Okay. Another question, will cross-platform slowly overtake native as performance converges?
Okay, let me answer that. So here we also need to like consider a bit of history. So as much as programming exists and different platforms exist, there were a number of tries to have such a universal, let's say, language or platform that will cover every situation and be like real cross-platform. Like Java, for example, also was invented for that reason. And these technologies have gained popularity and took a share in the development community and in the applications, but actually none of these technologies ever replaced native technologies fully. So taking into account this history and taking into account the aspects that we discussed today, I think no. Flutter will and is gaining popularity and taking a big part in the market, but to fully replace, I would not believe in that it can fully replace. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Also, we had another question, but very similar to the last one. They are asking, could Flutter eventually replace native development? I guess Andronik
No.
already answered.
Short answer, no.
Okay. Okay, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed our webinar, and I hope we managed to cover how Flutter and native technologies differ and how to decide which is best for your project. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Goodbye, everyone, and see you later.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.